Final one out west, at least. Game 5 of the 6-game road trip for the Philadelphia 76ers. Now in San Francisco to take on the Golden State Warriors. So a trek from Sacramento to Golden State. Try to move on from last night's loss and see if they can pick up a victory here and go 3-1, a part of the West Coast trip. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers Pregame Show presented by Bet365. Download the Bet365 app. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365, along with Derek Bodner, Kyle Newbeck. I'm Devon Gibbons. Bree is here with us. All of you hanging out once again. We are not at the portion of the Sixers After Dark, but it is still kind of late for a 10 o'clock start here. And Kyle's the last one, but one that they can learn from last night with the 113-107 loss, that they can move on from it, pick up the pieces, and take away from some of the good things that they did last night for 44 minutes and close out the game if they're in a similar situation.
Yeah, well, first of all, got the lineup news. Joel Embiid officially available. So that was I don't think it was in a ton of doubt, right? But at least with Joel, it's always let's just wait and see what they say at a half hour before the game. So, I mean, the biggest way to avoid the issues they had late game is getting the best player on the team back, and the guy who is the human safety valve, the person you can turn to in those spots. If not to get his own shot, then to help create shots for others, to draw double teams, create quality looks, and create that pecking order that we've talked about being so important to this group, right? Because we've seen over and over and over again when guys have had to scale up and guys have had to be, a little overstretched, overtaxed in their roles, that's had a negative effect. Generally, they have not been super successful trying to win games without Joel. Once again, it's broken clock is right always in this case. So Joel coming back is going to solve a lot of stuff. But I think what I want to see from Nick Nurse and from the team is what we saw, or what we talked about post-game show last night, which is, how about you run some stuff in the last 5 minutes of the game instead of running down the clock, instead of asking Paul George to ISO, instead of putting it all on Tyrese Maxey to beat switches. Like, continue running the plays that you're running the other 45 minutes of the game. And I know that that's not just a Sixers thing, right? That's a broader NBA problem that I have beef with. But given where this team is at, given that they need to get every win they can get, how about a little bit of focus on execution and doing the little things down the stretch that should hopefully make a big difference?
And what was frustrating about the ball movement down the stretch last night is they had periods of that game where the ball movement was exceptional, where the ball was moving, where they were making the extra pass, third, fourth, fifth pass, and they were really getting open looks out of it. And then it just stopped. It just stopped in the last couple of minutes. It's something that they have had problems with at various points throughout the season. It was really, really bad last night. Certainly, to Kyle's point, although I'm not sure that's how the broken clock saying goes, but I'll let you slide on that one. To Kyle's point, getting the best player on the team, one of the best players in the league back, will help the late game offense. It'll give you something reliable to go to, but they do need to all take a little bit more ownership, including Tyrese Maxey, including Paul George, and very specifically Nick Nurse, to not let something like that happen. So I'm really curious. This is one of those games where it's great that they are able to bounce back right away. I don't really root for back-to-backs. I wish they would be completely out of the schedule. But if there's ever a case where this would be a good one, it's when your star player was rested on the front end and you need to wash the stink out of last night out. And that is certainly where they're at.
Yeah, another good opportunity is 16-16 team, a 500 team. And we know the West is really good. But again, Golden State has their issues just like everyone else. They started off really well, and then they started to arrow point down for them with their overall play, some injuries and things of that nature. Of course, the Anthony Melton started the season, then did not. They make a trade for Dennis Schroeder for this team right now to see how that looks in the backcourt. Now that Anthony Melton was first injured and then traded since he was going to be out for the season, they've had their issues along this season. So a 500 basketball team that, once again, the Sixers, as we looked at it going into the Sacramento Kings game last night, hey, man, go for the sweep out west and get the first one last night and then feel good, get back out there once again quickly 24 hours later to play the Golden State Warriors. Unfortunately, the sweep is not there, but still a good chance at playing a basketball team that you should be able to. I mean, look, you have the issues with the Sixers with the lack of height at times. The same thing with the Golden State Warriors, where they don't necessarily, I mean, they have some players, of course, where you look at Jackson and, of course, with Draymond Green, the way that he gets in there and gets after it on the glass. But Joel Embiid should be able to, now that he's officially in, he should be able to do some pretty good things against this group here. The athleticism is there with Kuminga and Wiggins on the wing, but in the shooting, of course, of Steph Curry and the Draymond Green factor, where they are just a familiarity overall. But this is a team that they should be able to walk away at the end of the night, and we should be, again, talking about a close game, most likely, that they should be able to pull away from and get a victory, learning from the issues that they had last night against Sacramento. So if they're able to wash it away, as you guys said, just wash the stink away from what happened last night, but learn from the things that were issues and still get that same type of production from some of the players that did score last night, some of the positive things that did happen from the bench as well. We should be talking about a close game that should be decided somewhere in the end, and maybe the Sixers will come out on top.
Yeah, Devon, to your point about these teams have kind of been moving in the opposite direction, have been moving in the opposite direction in the last month or so. Since November 23rd, the Warriors are 4-13. So right around Thanksgiving, they have been a bad basketball team. And when you dig even deeper, you look at it and you say, okay, one of those wins is against Minnesota and one of those home back-to-back, like the mini series, where we talk about that a lot. That's almost always a split. So Getting one of those, you play a reeling Suns team the other night and they only win by 4 in that game. And Minnesota's one of their other. So they have 2 wins against Minnesota, who's been a mess, a win against Phoenix, who's been a mess, and one against Houston in early December. And that's pretty good. So otherwise, this team has been hard-pressed to beat anybody, right? They have losses against Brooklyn. They have losses against Indiana, both LA teams. They got their doors blown off by Cleveland right before the new year. Like, they have not been able to count on much of anything. And some of that is, as you brought up, the Anthony Melton getting hurt. That messed with their rotation. Certainly Buddy Hield coming back down to earth messed with their rotation, which
Are you describing the Warriors or the 2023-24 Sixers?
Right. And so people joked at the beginning of the season, it's like, oh, new team Buddy Hield, just prepare for it when he tails off. And he sure tailed off. And so they just...
Now Draymond Green's yelling at him.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, Kuminga, who's been the guy under a lot of scrutiny for most of the year, actually has been one of the few guys to perk up in recent weeks. And so I guess if you're the Sixers, you got to keep an eye out for that he's been calling his own number, loves to do so. And that's actually been working out for them. But it is a team trending down, and it's always a tricky game, right? This is not the end of the road trip, but it's the end of the West Coast part. And there is sort of that mental thing in the back of your head. Either you want to end it on a high note, or it's just like, oh, just get me home, get me back east, get me back closer so I can sleep in my own bed. I think in a weird way, the Kings loss will help them in that I think they'll come out tonight and have probably even a little more juice than they would have otherwise. And you hope that helps, because they got to make up for the fact that Tyrese Maxey played 42 and a half minutes and there are all kinds of problems with workloads and whatnot.
Yeah.
And Derek, just to move on to the Paul George side of things, you're not necessarily asking for him to get 30. Might be nice with Joel Embiid out there in the starting lineup with he and Maxey as well. But to just keep going, something worked last night with his offense, and may not be in the form of 30 points, but for it to be effective, the offensive side of things, not just the assists and the facilitating, but also to put the ball in the basket for himself as well, to take some of the pressure off of both Embiid and Maxey and carry some of that over from last night.
Yeah, that part that you mentioned about putting the ball in the basket, that is really all I would like to see. If he will just like, I do not need him to score 30. I don't need anywhere near that as a third option. I need him to make open shots. And if you've been in the PHLY Discord, which shame on you if you haven't been, but we would love to have you if you aren't. We have been discussing that a little bit on Paul George's shooting numbers. On like his open catch and shoot numbers are down 10 to 15% from where they were last year. I'd love to see some dribble handoffs and some pick and rolls with Embiid just to build some chemistry. And I would love to see him make shots. Those are like the only two. I'm trying to keep it really simple just so that he has a clear directive, form chemistry, and a lot of that's going to be 2-man games with Embiid. Great to see, some pin downs or whatnot to get him open shots. Off ball cuts like Kelly, fine. But I want that 2-man game to be developed, and I want him to make open shots. And if that yields 16 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists, I am 100% okay with that. Obviously, some of that depends on whether Maxey has it going, whether Joe has it going, whether you need him to ramp up. But I think there is a world where he is not necessarily doing a ton, but he's just making the most of the opportunities that he has. Why has he been struggling so much? We ran through some of the numbers with Embiid and without. It's hard for me to say. Like, clearly, I think maybe if you gave him a post touch or 2 more, that does tend to be in a spot where Joe likes to operate. But maybe if you clear out and give him a couple more of those, 1 or 2 a half, maybe he gets into a little more of a rhythm. Maybe go to him early to try to get him going and feeling confident. Certainly that worked last night. But really, in terms of what I need, I just need him to make shots and build chemistry.
Do we want to get into the complaint of the pregame, which is the fact that Kyle Lowry is starting again after last night's disaster class?
Yeah. No Kelly Oubre. So the starting lineup is Joel Embiid with Paul George, Caleb Martin in the front court, Tyrese Maxey along with Kyle Lowry in the backcourt once again. So no Kelly Oubre. He's still out dealing with the hand issue. So as we talked about last night, Kyle, Nick Nurse doesn't want to change anything because technically it worked.
No, it did not.
No, it absolutely did not work. Now, so
yeah,
I have a much bigger problem with him doing this tonight for multiple reasons. One, we just saw it didn't work last night. So you look directly at last night's evidence and say, hey, the old guy on the second half of a back-to-back, throw him back in the starting lineup. So that's bad. Here's the other thing. I don't need to learn anything about a Kyle Lowry, Tyrese Maxey pairing next to any of their important players. I think there is still plenty to learn about, for example, Gershon Yabusele in the front court next to Joel, and whether you can play 2 wings, Yabu and Maxey, alongside Joel. Because, frankly, those results have been mixed. There have been some really good stints and really good moments for Yabu and Embiid together. There have also been some times when they've gotten just blitzed completely and have not looked like a competent pairing in the front court, at least with the other stuff going on around them. I want to see more of that. And, look, I suspect we will see at least a little bit of that tonight, but why not give a guy like that a start who has played fairly well, been one of your best role players all season, made a couple threes last night, didn't even play particularly well, but at least had like a pulse over playing Kyle Lowry, who all the things that you would use as reasons or excuses to play him have not actually shown up on the film and in the games. I get it. He's the safety blanket, but your safety blanket has fleas and has needed to be washed for like the last 7 months.
Safety blanket has holes in it. It's not working. Throw it out.
And really quick, just to look at what Golden State is starting with on the opposite side, Curry and Schroeder in the backcourt, along with Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, and Tracy Jackson-Davis at the 5. So to your point, you have Joel, of course, but Yabusele would match up well with either one of those, depending on wherever Joel is defending. You can throw Yabusele on the other guy that he is not. So I agree with your point.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get how much more we need. And like, what did Kyle end up with minute wise? Like 15, 16? It wasn't
17,
much.
I believe, last night.
17,
pretty much right
31,
after
I have it
his
right here.
opening
17,
stint in the
21.
third quarter. There you go. That needs to be cut in half at least, and not against the starting lineups, which I don't. Again, the options aren't great, but we have seen this movie over and over and over again. He is just not good enough. He's just not good. I get you trust the decision making. I get you want another ball handler. Maybe run Tyrese a little more off ball. You don't need that quite as much now that you have Joe back. But I still get sort of like the urge. He's just not capable at this stage of his career, and it's nothing personal. He's had a great career. He's 38 years old. It happens. Happens to everyone. It's just the coach has to recognize it.
Yeah, and look, unlike last night where we could say, well, so Yabu has to start at center, or you want him to start at center, anyway, didn't have to necessarily. You're shifting a piece into the lineup, so that is opening another hole, and there are not many guys who could play in the spot that Lowry played last night. You have a ready-made guy to just play in the front court. I just play him. Just use the guy who's been a good player. I don't. This is the stuff that actually makes me mad, right? Like some people get pissed off about, well, why wasn't this ATO better, and why wasn't this? It's like this is such a low-hanging fruit, right? It's you have one guy who hasn't been good the whole year, save for maybe a game or two, and then you have a guy who's been good for the majority of the year in multiple roles, who is going to be relevant to your playoff picture and playoff rotation. Play the guy who's going to be relevant to your playoff rotation who's been good. Is it that complicated? I don't think
Kyle,
it is.
He's shooting 20.6% from the field and 17.4% from three since November 13th. That's almost 2 months. I don't.
No,
right,
watch.
so
He's going to go out there and he'll make like 8 threes tonight, and we'll have to deal with another 2 months of this nonsense.
That's fine, because that'll help him win, and I'll be happy. But I wouldn't get my bet 365 money. I'll tell you that. I'll take
now,
the under.
do you think it matters that Andre Drummond is not available tonight like he was last night, where you had those two backing up one another, playing, not playing next to one another, but playing off of one another and substituting for each other, where doesn't want to overtax Yabusele in this one. And look, he shouldn't, because Joel's probably going to play his 30 minutes. So just to ask the question, with Andre Drummond out, do you think that factored into the decision-making, or is it just simply the Nick Nurse blinders with Kyle Lowry?
I mean, maybe, but no.
I'm trying.
No.
I'm trying.
I'm sure that's going to be part of his explanation if he were to get asked about it after the game. But we talked about this when it was Maxey, McCain, right? When we were having those discussions and those debates, like, can you start them? How do you do it without playing these guys too many minutes? It's like you stagger them, right? You play Yabu and Joel together. Yabu comes out. Joel plays bench minutes with whoever you bring in off the bench, and then Yabu comes in for Joel. And then they play the end of the half together. Like, it isn't rocket science. I can sit down, or anybody could sit down before a basketball game and basically draw up a rough rotation pattern and say, this is how we get these guys who are our best players, or who we think are our best players, X amount of minutes in a game and X amount of minutes in a game together. So I think, to your point, Devon, I do think that's probably on their mind, but I don't think it really should be. I think there's easy ways around that.
I agree. Just figured I'd ask and throw it out there for the purpose of it. All right, so last night we did talk about a lot of the rotation, though. Yabusele coming off the bench, he is not starting. Eric Gordon gave you some good minutes, and we saw Ricky did not have good minutes off the bench. How would you like to see, Derek, some of the minutes spread out tonight, some of the ways that the substitutions are tonight? Eric Gordon certainly will be in, but how would you like to see some of it play out, since we did discuss it at the end of the night after the loss, that you did not necessarily like certain things about Nick Nurse's substitutions and lineups?
Yeah, I mean, Ricky's interesting because on the one hand, I feel like the gut instinct is send him lost, like just send him to the netherworld and we won't see him for a month and a half. I wouldn't mind seeing whether or not he can bounce back and respond to what I'm sure was a little bit of a spirited film session because of that pass, and whether or not he can take some constructive criticism and channel that and bounce back. And quite frankly, with Kelly out and with KJ out, you just need some good size on the wings and some athleticism and some defense. I don't know if I necessarily think that will happen, but I wouldn't mind giving him a chance. But I don't trust Ricky's decision making either. I'm not expecting him to bounce back. I just wouldn't mind seeing it. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously Yabusele is going to be the backup 5 with Drummond out. I think you're going to see Reggie for sure. Gordon, we'll see whether or not he can replicate the other night when he showed signs of life for the first time in quite a while. It would be great to get that shooting next to Joe and spread the floor a little bit. Quite frankly, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. I would consider starting Gordon over Kyle Lowry just because I think his fit is better. And when he is showing, and again, I don't like saying that, but we don't have great options here. Look, the rotation is thin. It's not exactly the deepest rotation in the world. And when you're talking about, having Drummond out and KJ out and Jared out and Kelly out, all of a sudden that gets thinner and thinner. There isn't a deep pool of players that I truly trust on that bench right now.
To the point about Gordon, I mean, he is the guy who played better last night, right?
He did.
Again, sometimes it's very simple. One guy played well last night, and you rewarded him with more minutes. Then why wouldn't you play? Especially because he makes sense next to Maxey in that role, like as just a floor spacer and a guy playing off of Joel.
Bigger, a more reliable shooter. Yep.
Yeah, and listen, we are far past the point of any of us being big advocates for Eric Gordon this season based on the track record that he's had here. But I think that's another easy one to not play Lowry. I feel bad that I just keep killing Lowry. It's really not his fault, right? Like he should be coming in a minimal role occasionally and being like the typical Kyle Lowry, drawing a charge, getting the odd transition kick out pass or hit ahead pass, and doing the things that he did when he had a lot sprier legs and the shot was there. Instead, he's being run out there and just making me mad because it's making me mad at the guy who's putting him out there. So all due respect to Kyle Lowry and the incredible career he's had, he's a sore spot for me at the moment.
Sir Shmooey says Eric Gordon is only here for the free dental. So that's all he's there for. But he did knock down some of those shots last night. He will, if he makes shots again tonight, he's going to get extended minutes. Last night off the bench, Eric Gordon, he did play 27 minutes last night, 5 for 9 from the floor, 3 for 7 from beyond with those 14 points. Also had 3 assists, which went a little bit, unnoticed, I'm sure, for a lot of people that he did have those 3 assists. So 27 minutes for him. As far as the ball handling goes, helps out with Embiid being back, but we also joked about Reggie Jackson getting some minutes, which he did. Do you go as deep as to put Jeff Doughton on the floor? Not going to do that probably tonight. Justin Edwards, we saw him briefly last night. Doubt that he gets the call either here this evening, but let's see what Nick Nurse does, especially if they have a lead of how he puts the lineup out there, who the closing lineup is, what decisions he makes, what guard is out there with Tyrese Maxey to help out overall. Just to move on here, earlier today, the first returns, Kyle, came back from the All-Star voting from the fans and all, and the 76ers had 3 guys on both the front court and the guards. Of course, Tyrese Maxey with the guards, front court, Paul George and Joel Embiid. But Joel Embiid in a spot we're not accustomed to seeing, Kyle, because Joel Embiid is normally in the top 3, holding off whomever else to be that starting guy in the front court, the big man. And right now he is 8th with 170,420 as of earlier today. Paul George is 9th. 167,613, and Tyrese Maxey is 7th 246,648. Joel normally has played many more games at this point for people to get a chance to look at him, but Karl Anthony Towns is in the top 3 there with Giannis and Jason Tatum. Just your thoughts on the early return so far on the 3 Sixers.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair in that none of them are close to being all-stars right now, if you're asking me. And I think
with Maxey being the closest of the 3.
Yeah, and even then, like being 7th in backcourt voting.
The guy behind him is Jordan Poole, so he's not really all that close.
Yeah, so I would say, honestly, the big thing that's noteworthy to me, because we've seen it before. There are guys who like haven't played and have been bench role players who have gotten tons of all-star votes. I think it's interesting how low that Joel is, even with the lack of games played, and what that says about his reputation and his popularity, not just around the league, but also in Philadelphia. I think that's a reflection of the apathy that a lot of people were battling first month and a half of the season, where it's like, hey, this was supposed to be fresh and new, and there's a plan, and there's this, and then, well, Joel's gone for 2.5 weeks, and we don't know when he's going to play, and Paul's hurt. And so clearly not just Sixers fans, but basketball fans in general have felt apathy about him, and can't blame him for that when he hasn't played all that much relative to the rest of the competition. These guys have a lot to prove, and until they play better, they're not really going to have a case to be like, yeah, we definitely have an all-star that should be on this team. You don't win games and you put up worse numbers than you did last year when you did make the all-star team. Sorry, hard to feel bad for you.
Yeah, I can't get angry at any of these. Like Tyrese Maxey is the one who has the best case just because he's been producing and been in most of the games. Yep. But he, the last 3 weeks or so, he's played like an all-star. Before then, he wasn't even close. So, like, if he keeps trending in that direction, he might have a chance. Although, some tough competition going up there, especially when you talk about that, top 3 or so in Mitchell, Lillard, and Brunson. But no, you don't get to be an all-star by playing 11 games. And I'm not even really a big participation kind of guy. Like, I don't, MVP to me is not even really MVP. It would certainly factor in with MVP. But when you're talking about all-star, when you're talking about all-NBA, I think I'm probably a little more lenient on games played than others. I do want to veer towards the best players, not the most available players. But when you've played in a third of the games, like that's not, you're not getting caught up in, well, one guy played 27 games, one guy played 22. So I'm going to reward it. This is a massive difference. And Paul George just hasn't been close to an all-star caliber player. So yeah, I can't get up in arms about any of them. I think Tyrese Maxey has the best chance if he keeps trending upwards, but he still has quite a bit of work to do.
Absolutely. Going for his second consecutive all-star appearance for this Philadelphia 76ers. And as we get ready for this one tonight, let's get to our Bet365 pregame picks, brought to you by Bet365, our presenting sponsor as well. And again, when you check in with Bet365, use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. All right, Bree, let's let the people know Joel Embiid is back. He always makes me wait to make my decision. So I went with him tonight. Over 27.5 tonight against the Golden State Warriors. Sometimes with these young guys, he can just flat out destroy them right away with Jackson Davis, or he will do too much and force a lot of shots where he goes like 2 for 8 in the first quarter and starts getting frustrated because he's not getting the calls that he wants. But I do think that he will get that over of 27.5. Also, Dennis Schroeder playing off ball or playing both on ball and off ball in the backcourt with Steph Curry, over 5.5 assists for him tonight. Same game parlay with those two included, plus 240. That is once again our pregame segment. Pregame pick segment brought to you by Bet365. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. You must be 21 plus and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Again, our presenting sponsor as well, not just our pregame picks sponsor here on the pregame show. All right, fellas, that'll do it for us here as we get ready for this game. The final one, staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning until we have to do it again in March. But here we are for this one where we have to stay up one more time and a chance for them to get a win, their 5th game on this 6-game road trip. The final one will be Saturday in Brooklyn. That's a 6 o'clock game in Brooklyn, and we will be wide awake for that one. For Derek and Kyle, I'm Devon. For Bree as well, we'll talk to you folks after the game. Appreciate you hanging out with us. Join us post-game right here once again on the PHLY Sixers podcast. See you then.
We all silly like